It feels very surreal to be here right now. I am standing beside where my first apartment in Tokyo used to be, formerly known as the Akasaka Weekly Mansion, but it has since been demolished and is now a Hotel My Stays. I thought that I would do a much requested video about my modeling story here in Japan, how I got started, what it was like, answering some of your more juicy questions, and having the first neighborhood that I stayed in as a backdrop. To be clear, I don't model anymore. I am 32 years old right now, and even my last contract when I was at 25, you're already pushing like being a senior citizen in the modeling industry. I know it's ridiculous, but it is what it is. So I really don't model anymore, but I do really look back at that time in my life with overall very positive memories. So let me actually give you guys a street view of where I was here in Akasaka. It was kind of just off of a main road in the more residential part of it, because Akasaka itself is a business district, and my apartment at the time was about half of the size of this hotel. It definitely wasn't this big, but it was your basic sort of Japanese apartment, kind of similar to what we have nowadays as far as Airbnbs. The apartment I did, of course, rent from the agency, and they forward you the money, which you then later have to pay back through jobs. But thankfully it was a nice place, and the two girls that I had as roommates were super sweet. I first started modeling when I was 13 years old, which I know is really insane when you think about it, and if I ever have kids, I don't think I will be allowing them to get into that kind of industry at that age, because I do believe it is far too young. But being from small town Saskatchewan, this was really a dream for me. I watched a lot of fashion television and thought that by being a model, that would be a great way to get into the industry. Obviously, Saskatchewan isn't exactly fashion central, so while I did sign with the most legit agency that we had at the time, it's called She Models, and it was with them when I was 14 years old that I first went to Faces West, which is a modeling convention in Vancouver. If you go to a legit modeling convention, because trust me, there's a lot of scam ones out there, and overall nowadays I wouldn't recommend them. But back then, that really was the main way to get in front of a lot of big agencies all at once. I was actually quite surprised at how well I did do at the convention, considering this was my very first one and I was so young. Red flag at the time, but you know, looking back, I was super excited to just have so many agencies interested in me. And after I did do all my meetings, it was quite clear that Team agency here in Tokyo was the one that was most serious and that really wanted me to come out as soon as possible. So they were the ones that I focused my attention on. But I will admit that closer to the time of the trip, I did start to get quite nervous about the trip, because I didn't really know what Japan was going to be like. I really didn't know that much about it, and I was also really worried about the fact, you know, do they speak English here? How will I communicate? So I ended up purchasing a language learning program to kind of help me with my first trip. And funny enough, this is a very full circle moment right now in this video, because the language learning program that I bought, today's video is in partnership with. So I have worked with Rosetta Stone quite a few different times now, really recommend them. But back then it was something that helped me just have a little bit more confidence when I was coming here, where at least I knew the sort of basics of the language, and it helped me get by. So what I really like about Rosetta Stone is that they use an immersion approach to learning a new language, where you're seeing a visual, you're seeing how it's written, you're hearing how it sounds. And then with their voice recognition tool, it helps you know if you're actually pronouncing it correctly, so it helps you have real-life conversations a lot faster than learning individual words.
彼は車を持っています。
彼は車を持っています。Rosetta Stone has 25 different languages that you can learn, and the ones that I have tried out are Japanese, Russian, the advanced version, and also Spanish. And right now they are actually having a very special promotion on their lifetime subscription, which gives you all of their different language learning programs for life for only $150. Usually it's $299, but for the next while, and if you click the link in my description, it's only $150. That is an amazing savings, so I hope you guys will check it out. It's definitely a useful program to help you feel more comfortable when you are traveling, and it's just so cool to be able to know a second language.
Yesterday there was sun and there was rain, beauty in the mundane. And as the light startled our eyes, we let go of disguise.
And here we are in the downtown part of Akasaka. As I said before, this is primarily a business district. There's a lot of brands that have their headquarters in this area. My model apartment was about a 15-minute walk from the agency, which is closer to the subway station Akasaka Mitsuke. So let's actually walk the route that I would always take to the agency from my place, and I will tell you guys about the day-to-day sort of happenings of what it was like to be a model here. Monday through Friday were more or less casting days. When I came here in, I think it was 2006, for the first time, the market was absolutely crazy. I will never forget my first day and how overwhelmed I was because I remember I had castings from like 10 a.m. until probably about 10 o'clock at night. Of course, we also got some breaks in there, like we could take an hour or two for lunch when we didn't have a casting, but more or less we were being drove around in the agency van with our booker Sheena, who is a super cool lady. She would basically take us to all of our castings, introduce us, translate everything, and depending on what the casting was for, sometimes you'd have to try on clothes and they'd take pictures, or if it was a commercial, you'd maybe have to act something out. So every day was different in that regard, and usually you didn't know until the day what castings you had and what time they were at. So that was our Monday to Friday, but of course if you got a job, like an actual paying job, because keep in mind we're not being paid for the castings. That's why modeling work, to be profitable, has to pay quite a bit, because you're doing so much extra stuff for free. So of course anytime during the week there was a possibility that you might get a job, which was obviously very positive news, but sometimes you could even book a job on the weekends, which would mean that you were also working the weekends. So that's what it was like in 2006, but when I came for my second contract in 2008, it was a completely different story, because that was when, you know, the global recession happened and brands just weren't spending as much money on their campaigns. There wasn't as many castings. So when I came for that contract, it was a totally different story. And perfect timing in saying that, we actually just arrived to where my agency was, and I still think is, I'm not exactly sure, but my agency team was in the Tokyo Plaza, I forget which floor, but this was the street that I came to every single morning. You basically reported to the agency first thing in the day and then kind of got your schedule from there. Overall, I had a very positive experience with Team Agency. All of their managers and bookers were really nice people, and especially considering how young I was the youngest person in my agency when I was there. I think the average age was like 18 or 19 for most of the girls. There was one other model that was 17. So they really took good care of me, and I did feel like they had my best interests at heart. And in general, I think Japan is probably one of the safer markets for models to go to, especially for a first contract.
Hand in hand, building castles out of sand, reaching for the grand. As willows align, we lose track of time. Head up high, now we climb. Oh, oh, oh.
So I was walking by here and I saw that they had happy hour cocktails for $4.50. Oh my gosh, I love Japan. So I thought it would actually be easier for me to sit down and answer some of the questions that you guys wrote me on Instagram about what it was like modeling here. The first question that I got was, what kind of jobs did you do? Like, what are some of the clients that I worked for and what kind of jobs were they? So Japan is obviously a huge market for Asia. There is a lot of money here. I would argue that if you are a model working the Asian market, most likely you're going to be paid the best here. Japan definitely has a lot of great reputable brands, and I feel like I auditioned for most of them, and I worked for quite a few brands like Canon, Mitsubishi, Shiseido. You know, there's a huge spectrum of different Japanese brands, and you get to audition for them because it is in Tokyo where most of the jobs take place. Second question, not surprising at all, but asking how much money did you make? So this really ranged. Like, it really depended on the client. It depended on what kind of job it was. Like, was it for the web? Was it a billboard? Was it a commercial? Was it going to be a 1-day shooting, 2-day shooting? Like, there's a lot of different factors that went into place. But like I said, most of the time we were compensated quite well. I would say that the average day job, like just an afternoon shooting, would probably be a minimum of like $700 net. As a contract model with a good agency, you were usually working with really good clients who paid well. So that was kind of the starting point, and it could easily go as high as like $10,000 if it was a huge brand, and sometimes you could even make more if the rights to it kept being bought. But yeah, for me personally, I think that $700-800 range per day was the lowest that I was ever paid. And then the highest, I think, was about $2,000 or $2,500 for Honda. I think Honda was my biggest job that I did because it was like a commercial and then also print work. Question number 3, what is the ideal size for a model? So this can slightly range depending on how tall you are. Obviously, if you're a super tall person, they're okay if your measurements are a little bit more. But overall, the industry standard is about a 0 to size 2, which in measurements in inches is about 32, 24, 34. Like, very small. As somebody who is, 5'6", 5'7", I was extremely skinny on that first contract, and I was those measurements. So I can't imagine if somebody's like 5'10", how crazy skinny they are to be those same measurements. Having worked in this industry, I obviously have a lot of strong opinions about the fact that I don't think it's healthy for most people to be that size, and I can speak from experience and seeing it with my own eyes that a lot of models really have to work hard, and a lot of times are not doing it in a healthy way to be able to maintain that kind of shape, because it's just not possible for most people. Of course, there's a certain percentage of models that are just genetically like that, and it's not difficult for them to maintain those kinds of measurements, but just from what I saw in the industry, most people have to work at it. Question number 4, why hire Western people to model to Japanese markets? Well, I mean, basically for diversity, and because the Western standard of beauty is considered to be quite beautiful here. Of course, the majority of models on the Japanese market are Japanese, and they usually have separate agencies from the Western models. Like, everybody at my agency was a foreigner. Most of them were from Eastern Europe, and I think overall that is still the case, where there is a lot of models in Asia specifically, from Russia, from Ukraine, from Belarus. So that was the case when I was here, but of course most of the models in the modeling market in Japan are Japanese. We're just basically the extra sprinkle of diversity to show that, oh look, in Japan there's foreigners. Question number 5, what was your favorite job? That's hard to say because I actually did have a lot of really good jobs, and for that I am grateful. But I would say that my favorite job was with the Japanese company Peach John, which if you've been to Tokyo, you've probably seen their stores. In a way, it's sort of the Victoria's Secret of Japan, just like a lot more cute instead of sexy. So I got a job for more of their lifestyle sort of clothes, where I was wearing more loungewear and office wear, but their main product is like bras and underwear. They're kind of one of the top stores in the country for that sort of thing. So that job was especially memorable because I remember going into the casting thinking that there was no way I was going to get it. I was very insecure, about the way I looked, especially for an underwear brand, and usually they go with girls that are much more established, have really big careers. So I didn't think there was any way I was going to get that job, and I did end up getting it, and it was just so magical because they treated me so well. It was such a fun day on set, and the pictures turned out super cute, so I was really proud of that job. Question number 6, did anything scary or bad happen to you while you were working as a model? So thankfully nothing too traumatic, I guess you could say, because 100% there is a very dark side to the modeling industry. There are a lot of literal children who get taken advantage of, because that's the sad part of it, is that at that age a lot of teenagers are very naive and trusting, and some shady adults tend to take advantage of that. So for sure there are really bad things that happen in the modeling industry, but for me personally, of course, I got so much pressure to be like deathly thin, like extremely unhealthy, about to enter a casket sort of thin. So that was obviously a big negative that I had to always have hanging over me in my career, and it took me a really long time to actually make my health a priority and not fall to those kinds of pressures. The funny part was that actually when I came back here when I was 20 years old on a working holiday visa, that's when I actually booked some really big jobs, and I was about 15 pounds heavier than I was when I was a contract model, and I still worked really well. So especially in this day and age, I don't believe that models should be held to that ridiculous sort of standard. Like, you can still look really fit, really healthy, but not look like a skeleton. In my opinion, that is not attractive. And last question, it actually comes from my friend Jillian, who I used to model with here in Tokyo, and she was also my roomie for a time. She asks, did you actually like the modeling part, or were you just happy to travel? Which is a very fair question, and I still actually ask myself the same thing, because of course I loved the modeling part. I wanted to do that job from the get-go. I thought it would be so glamorous and just so amazing to be in that industry. So obviously I did have a love for it, and I did enjoy doing it. But see, the longer that I stayed in that industry, I did actually realize that while I enjoyed the work, what I enjoyed more was being in the new environment, the new culture. I especially like jobs that I would have outside of Tokyo. Sometimes you had jobs that would take you to, I think I went to Izu, to Nagoya, and all those expenses would be paid. So I'd get to see a new place even for a little while for free, as well as to work a job. So if I had to pick one or the other, I would say that I enjoyed the travel part more. Modeling was just the vehicle that I had at my disposal at that time, and I feel like I made the most of it. Now, to end off today's video, I thought that I would actually do it in front of the TBS building, which is one of the largest TV networks here in Japan. And it was in this building that I actually booked my biggest role of my career in Japan, which was for the TV show Ataru. But that was the trip that I did when I was 20 years old on a working holiday. that whole period of my life is a whole other video in and of itself. But I hope you enjoyed this one and found it interesting. Once again, really want to say a big thank you to Rosetta Stone for sponsoring today's video. I'm going to have the link in the description with that awesome discount that they have. And as always, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'm sending you lots of love, and keep being your own kind of beautiful. Bye, guys.